Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to embark on a journey like no other. Welcome to the Glum Lot Podcast,
your go-to destination for a unique blend of recovery and discovery.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Mark. And in this podcast, we will endeavor to create a safe and uplifting space for our guests and listeners to share their stories with sincerity and a touch of humor.
Remember, we are not a Glum Lot. The Glum Lot Podcast is more than just a source of entertainment. It's a beacon of hope, proving that even in the darkest moments, recovery is possible. Every story we share carries the power to inspire positive change.
So buckle up, get ready to listen, and join us in discovering the strength that lies within every individual's journey. This is the Glum Lot Podcast, where humor meets hope.
Okay, Brett, welcome to episode number 77 of the Glum Lot Podcast. Go.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Brett.
That's exactly how I feel.
So we just want to remind our guests to clack on that Facebook page.
Clickety-clack.
Clickety-clack on that. And if you see us out on the social medias, go ahead and like and subscribe and do whatever people do. So yeah.
Definitely.
Anyways, what's on your mind?
So I'd like to chat about overcommitting a little bit and keeping too busy.
Saying yes too much.
I've been guilty lately.
You know, we're told that whenever the hand of AA reaches out, we are to be there for it. However, when we get to the point that we say yes to the detriment of the rest of what we're doing for AA or our families, it's you know what we really got to shoot for? Balance.
Yeah.
That's
and
hard.
I'm at that point in my sobriety where I need to really start working on it because today, for instance, you know, this whole week I've got lots of presentations to do. I had scouts who I'm involved with, and I had a meeting before that, and it's just, then working with sponsees and meetings, and holy smokes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to take care of yourself, too.
Yeah, and I know you've got a big home group commitment that includes setting up, and we both are a part of a big book study that we put on, and you also do reading the big book with newcomers, and you really gotta seek balance because it starts to be detrimental to all when you overcommit,
including myself.
And boy, I know when I was out, chaos was a part of my build. You know what I mean? Like I wanted chaos. I liked going out at night, not knowing what was going to happen, where I was going to be, any of that stuff. And we got to give that up. I mean, it's good to have a little bit of surprise in your life, but to operate under chaos is not good for sobriety.
Yeah.
So.
And I think a little bit of it, too, is it keeps our minds busy.
Yeah.
And, sometimes when we have some stuff going on, we'll get really busy so we don't have to think about it.
You know, I remember an old a DWI commercial that ran that said, know when to say when.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we never did, but
Hell no.
we can know when to say when to committing to things. So it's good to keep in mind, and it's important. Sure. And don't feel bad. Because every once in a while you do have to say no, you know, and it's good for everybody. So we have a guest today all the way from
Alabama.
Again, we're on our Alabama stint there.
Yeah. So this was so we recently had a couple people on, and Lauren was one of the most recent ones, and we are honored and blessed to be able to have a discussion with her husband.
Mm-hmm. Who I believe is also best friends with our previous guest.
Yes, with Ozzy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this should be really interesting. And these people are very involved in the yellow balloon community out there in the world, and it's great to hear from them. And they're very active in AA and yellow balloon groups and sobriety in general.
Yeah.
So this individual's name is...
Scott.
So without further delay, let's welcome Scott. Welcome to the Glum Lot Podcast, Scott.
Hey, Scott.
So we're glad to have you here. And where are you located in Alabama?
I'm in Gulf Shores.
Gulf Shores, okay.
Down in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yep. Now, our two previous guests, Ozzy
and Lauren,
you are Ozzy's best friend?
Grew up together.
Man.
All the way through high school, college.
That's funny that you would grow up together.
Various forms of drug addiction.
I was going to say, so you ran together,
Yes.
And now you're both sober together.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
it's a journey.
Yeah. Can we start with your sobriety date?
Yes, May the 18th of 2019.
Okay. And do you remember your first encounter with the effects of drugs or alcohol?
Yeah, like all the details.
The first time I had a drink of alcohol was my brother took me to the Atlanta Motor Speedway when I was in like 10th grade to a NASCAR race, which if you like know me is like the exact opposite of everything that I do. But at the time, I was hanging out with my older brother and he took me to a race and I drank a 6-pack of beer and threw up in the back seat of his Mustang and a bag of groceries on the way home.
Oh, man.
Nice.
I drove on that racetrack.
Did you?
Yeah, fun fact. Yep, sure did.
Really?
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then the second time was at my junior year homecoming dance. And I chugged a fifth of vodka after the high school football game. I chugged a fifth of vodka in between leaving the game and going to the dance, and passed out inside the gym and got taken outside, threw up on the principal, had to get drugged to the hospital, had my stomach pumped.
Oh no.
Damn.
Was from that point forward labeled the black sheep of town and took that reputation and ran with it. I remember it very distinctly.
I think you're our first stomach pumper.
Yeah. Do you no? So do you remember the feeling that you got when you caught that buzz? And did you fall in love with it?
Not so much the alcohol. I really can't tell you I was hooked from the beginning with that in particular.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little later on with some of the opiates is when
the addiction really took a hold.
That I was like, wow, this is it. This is what I've been looking for the whole time.
Yeah. But nonetheless, alcohol did make you feel probably more comfortable.
I mean, it did the trick, you know, like it definitely paved the way.
Sounds like it gave you a reputation.
It gave me a reputation, and I remember I had a brother that was 9 years older than me. And when after that happened, he had gone off to college and was probably working by then, but he was like, it doesn't matter what people think about you, get your shit done and do it your way and make it work.
Right.
And so I took on this, like Ozzy graduated valedictorian in the class. I was the salutatorian.
Oh, shit.
You're a smart one.
I went through college, did really well in college, stayed in college, got my master's, got my PhD. And that whole time, it was like a game to me. Like how fucked up can you get
and still
hold it together?
Yeah.
And I like in college, you could blend in, right? With I could party and then I could pull it together for a test or, whatever I needed to do. But I would look around me and everybody I was hanging out with was flunking out and, fucking up. It's just as bad as I was, but I was able to make it through college and do the things I need to do to keep going, because I knew that like if I fucked that up, then like the parents were going to cut off the funds. Right. So like I did whatever I had to do to keep the plate spinning.
Yeah.
I did the same thing in college. I was a bartender and I would get fucked up every night. And I'd get home. Yeah. I'd get home at like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. But I'd always get my ass up, make it there. And I'd study in the car on the way, and I had an A average all the way through.
Yep.
And it's like I did just enough to get an A. Could I have done more? Yes, but I did enough.
I did nothing.
And I did it to protect my drinking too.
Yeah,
it worked out,
I wasn't really aware of that at the time, but like looking back, like people have asked me, just imagine what you could have done if you would have done all that sober. And, the truth was I wouldn't have. Like I wouldn't have stayed in college. Like like that was just that allowed me to blend in and party, and still do the things that I wanted to do. If I would have been like sober, I probably would have taken my life down a totally different path. Probably, who knows, right? Like I'm here because, it in the long run it worked out, but like it was I always kind of say it was like a performance enhancer. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I would get this like perfect chemical balance, right? And I would like bang out a bunch of work. But I remember when I got my PhD, it was in 2008. Then I got a job, and I was in the late stages of a really bad Oxycontin addiction at that point. And I was on the schedule of my dealer, right? So like that's when the house started crumbling. When I had to start answering to boss man's schedule and
work
and the work, there started being conflicts, and I couldn't keep those plates spinning simultaneously without one interfering with the other. So I actually went to treatment for the first time in 2009.
What was your doctorate in?
I'm sorry?
What was your doctorate degree in?
Environmental engineering.
Okay. And so you're in college. What was your first exposure to opiates, and how did that happen?
Probably Ozzy.
Oh, shit.
That's
all right.
Bitch.
Yeah, he had a we'll just leave it at
well,
this.
he was he had a good job, right?
Yeah, he had the connection. So we
shared
exploited that to the best of our abilities. Yeah.
Yes, I remember his story. And for those of you who haven't gone back and listened to, I think it was 2 episodes ago, right?
Yeah, the statute of limitations is up on us.
That's exactly what he said.
He did share it.
So go back and listen to Ozzy. You'll get the backstory on that one. But awesome. So that opiate addiction just had you by the balls, then, right? I mean, there's no.
I probably it registered as a problem probably in 2004, but I had a good thing going, was getting them, was selling them, so I wouldn't run out. And so I was able to keep it going until 2009, when I was in a serious relationship. I got a job, and there was no more hiding it. Right. So like it came crumbling down very, very quickly from that point forward.
What was the allure
of the Oxycontin?
Yeah. I mean, what?
People talk about like painkillers will, put you down. And, for me, it did the exact opposite, right? I defended my dissertation. I went in the back, did copious amounts of it on a back table, went in front of my dissertation committee and babbled for an hour and a half with complete and utter confidence. It knocked that edge off. And,
do you have an active brain?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And
I can recognize this. Yeah. Yep.
And so it would quell any kind of anxiety, any kind of crippling
anxiety. It would quell
anxiety.
the anxiety.
Help you concentrate.
It would motivate me. Yeah, I was able to concentrate.
Yeah.
Later that turned, from there, it was like 2009, went to treatment. 2010, my father passed away. I got a phone call that he was doing really bad. So I drove, he had cancer and kind of struggled with it for 4 or 5 years. So I had about 6 months sober, drove about 5 hours to his, to where I grew up to see him. And on the way, that little monkey started talking to me again. And I knew I needed to call my sponsor and talk to him, because my father, I knew he had a ton of painkillers at his house. And he was in the hospital. So mom and dad were at the hospital. So all I got to do is just stop by the house and I can stock up. And so for 5 hours, I'm driving with like, good wolf, bad wolf on each shoulder, knowing I should call my sponsor, but I knew what my sponsor was going to try to get me to do. Right. So and I knew what I wanted to do, and I was hurting, right? Like I was hurting really bad.
Well, that's a scary thing to go face.
Yeah. So I drove to his house. I remember he had like all these different pill bottles, all these different things, right? Like what as a dying cancer patient would have. Put all the, the morphines in this one and the Lortabs in this one. And I did a couple, and then I went to the hospital, and for some reason, it always sticks with me. I stopped and got a turkey sandwich before I went in there, and I was so messed up, I just bebopped in the hospital, and he's sitting there in like really bad shape. My mom's sitting there and she's hurting, and I sit down and I'm just sitting there eating my sandwich, just high as a kite, and I nod out in front of them.
Oh.
And by this point I had like made amends to my parents and come clean. So they kind of knew what was going on. And so they called me out on it. So I had to go home. They told me to go home, rest, sleep it off. So I went home and cooked up one of those morphines and put it in my arm, and I didn't even get the needle out, and I overdosed and was laying there on the bed with the belt still hanging out of my mouth. And my mom was worried and came home and found me laying on the bed. So, here she is with her husband of 40 something years in the hospital, and, and now her son's laying dead and luckily, like, our neighbor drove by. She was a nurse. They did CPR on me, brought me back, got me to the hospital, and I went to treatment for like about a week, and just to kind of get my head right, and got out and was able to be there when my father passed. And then that kind of started like this chain of like skidding off bottom for, I would get it together for a little while, for a few months. And then, I would go back and so I went to treatment in like 2012. And then at some point I like kind of got it together, and I think it was from like late 2012 to about 2015. Like I was doing good. I was getting promotions at work, getting raises, getting all the pats on the backs. But internally, like in retrospect, what I did was I became a workaholic, and it's all I did was just, the last thing I did at night, I had a wife beside me in the bed. Last thing I did at night was check emails. First thing I did in the morning.
Yeah.
That turned into, I can't keep up. I need something to help. So I started doing a little Adderall. That turned into, I need something to knock the edge off the Adderall. Let me have a couple beers, and, one more trip to the insane asylum, here we go.
Can I back you up for a second? Your first stint in treatment, how did that come about? Did someone confront you, or did you come to your own realization?
Oh, yeah. So it's funny, man. So I was getting married, and my fiance at the time, like, she knew I detoxed at her house a couple of times, and I was trying to get it together. And I kept telling her that I'll get sober when we get married. And at some point we started seeing what I thought was a marriage counselor. Like, I legitimately thought this person was a marriage counselor. And we go see him 4, 5, 6 times. And like, the drug use and stuff comes up, but not like pressing that I can remember, at least. But then we got married, and there was this like blowout party and a big hoopla, and and I ran out of drugs that following Monday, and we had a appointment. We were supposed to go see this marriage counselor the day after, and we go in there, and they were like, okay, here you are. You said you were going to get sober when you got married, and, kind of look at you. And I was like, okay, I'll I'll go to treatment.
Yeah.
So this, woman who like was an amazing woman, my ex-wife, she knew it, the whole time and tried to like, help get me sober. And I don't know, I mean, it was wishful thinking on her part, but that sent me to my first treatment. And she stuck with me then for 7 years of us, me building up hope and tearing it down, time and time again.
So you go to treatment for opiates, right?
Yes. And many other things, but that was primary.
So when you got out, did you attend meetings?
Every day.
NA or AA or?
AA primarily.
Okay. And do you continue with outpatient as well?
I did not.
Okay. But somewhere along the line, numerous times, you just backslid, right? I mean, you kept using on and off.
Yeah. I still wanted to get high, I just didn't want the consequences of it,
right.
Like I just wanted you to
kept
leave me
telling
the fuck
yourself
alone,
there wouldn't be
man.
a consequence, probably.
Right. Like I just wanted you to leave me alone, let me be and let me do my thing.
Isn't that the insanity of the disease? I mean, it really is when you look at it. And then the progressiveness too.
Looking back, like you can't do anything but laugh at it. Like it's just so pitiful and so
it's so tragic, man.
Yeah,
it is
absolutely tragic. And to know the people that like stuck around and watch you do this.
When you tell the story about, your father's last days and your mother struggling with that, and then your addiction, and you look back on that, you're like, this is fucking just tragic. Everything about it is tragic.
Yeah.
And obviously your mother's some kind of saint, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, and they're kind of the reason I told that story was because it happened again with her 10 years later.
No shit.
The 2015, like, it kind of, that's when I got into, I went to the other end of the spectrum. It turns out there's actually, like, from what I've read, there's actually science behind if you get like opiate addictions, you become much more susceptible to going to the other end of the spectrum for like, speed and cocaine and methamphetamines and stuff. So like, and that was never really my thing. I would do a little bit of it, but it didn't like grab me. Right. But 2015, I went to that end and I got really, really bad off of crack cocaine. And I went to rehab for a year while I was there, and I got divorced. And I ended up moving and staying in this town where I went to treatment for a year and skidded off bottom there until 2019. And my mother got a terminal illness like in late 2018, and I was really bad off, and I did the same thing again, except this time I was in a town called Auburn at my girlfriend at the time's grandmother's house. I had been to visit my mother. She, it's just a long story behind that, but she was dating a man who, like, there was a lot of issues there, and she asked me to leave so that she could see him. And, I got the poor, pitiful knees, and I went back to my home and stopped and got some heroin. Never done heroin before, and shot it up in my girlfriend's grandmother's bathroom at 3 a.m. and overdosed, and the paramedics had to kick the door in. So now here's my mother in the hospital dying, and I do the same thing again, right? And I knew that I was, like, when she got sick, I knew I was going, in order to stop using, I was going to have to get help. But I had tore it down so many times that I didn't want to disappoint her again. So my plan was literally I text messages in my phone with the rehab, and I'm like, y'all keep a bed ready. I will leave from the funeral and come straight to treatment. So my plan was to hold on until she passed. and I was gonna go in after that. Well, May 18th of 2019, I overdosed for the last time. They kicked the door in at my girlfriend's house or grandmother's house and bring me back, and I wake up and I go to treatment. And, I'm in treatment, and I don't know if my mother's going to live.
Yeah, through the time you're there.
By the time I get out, I couldn't talk to her because she had lost her hearing, and some things went down at the treatment center, and I ended up having to leave there, and I got out, and I was holding on like by a thread. Truth be told, like, I think my first my first like 3 months of sobriety were purely out of spite. The best thing that treatment center ever told me is, if you don't go to a long-term treatment center, you're going to get high again. But I couldn't go because I needed to be there for my mother. Right. But when they told me that, it was like, fuck you. I'll show you.
Of course.
Yeah. Hey, sometimes that can be powerful,
Yeah. And my sponsor was like, why don't you just run with that for a little while?
See how far it gets you? We'll take it. Yeah. Better than nothing. Yeah, let me ask you this, so maybe you can give us some insight and the listeners some insight. I mean, you're a guy that went through some near-death experiences with overdosing and multiple treatment centers, relationships, all the stuff we talk about in meetings. And do you know what it was that kept you from getting sober? Is there anything you can put your finger on? Like why you had failed then? Was it not enough pain? Was it not enough desperation? Were you able to bullshit yourself and that whole delusional denial thing was strong? Or what do you think?
I think you kind of touched on something with not enough pain. Mm-hmm. My first few treatments, I was married when I went into them. I was married when I came out of them. I had I always had somebody there to fall on. And if it wasn't my ex-wife, it was my mother.
Right.
And I remember sitting there, I got sober on May 18th, I guess, when I went to treatment, last day I used. But my mother passed on July 23rd of that year. And I remember sitting there, and the fire was still on my ass. Like, I remember the pain. But I remember it was the first time that I ever knew and I ever believed, if I fuck up, I'm done. I don't have anybody that I can come crawling back to, that I can, I always had those strong people in my life that I could lean on. And take advantage of, really, is what I was doing.
No, right? I know for myself, there have been times in my life when I've told myself, no one is coming to get you. It's all on you. It's 100% on you. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what it takes. And you know what? Sometimes people get there and it's still not enough. And they do end up dying. They don't have it in them.
Yeah.
Most.
But what? It hurts so bad. And I was so tired of being the person that I was. I was strung out. Then my last addiction, I got on methamphetamines real bad. I weighed 230 pounds. Now I was at I think I was about $175 when I went into treatment. I'd been living on like an oatmeal cream pie every like 3 days for months. I remember I was like losing so much weight, I would like go shove peanut butter in my mouth, because I felt like people were going to catch on to my addiction. So, it's just like every relationship I got in, I always ended up in this same exact spot. And I was so tired of of just being a fucking piece of shit, man. It's like the bottom line. It's just like I hated who I was as a person. You know, it was like I went to a meeting almost every day for 10 years and I mean, I remember I was going to this 6:30 meeting every morning, and my dealer would wake up about like 7:15 or 7:20. So like if I was home, I would have to wait on my wife to leave to go to work before I could go see him. So I would just go to the meeting at 6:30 and just wait on his text message.
Pass the time.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter if, somebody could be sharing the most fire information in the meeting. I wanted to get loaded, and I was going to, but when I was ready, I became willing to like look at those things, and actually it's like, I don't know. I always felt like, I worked steps 2 or 3 times, over that 10-year period, but it just felt like I was going through the motions, and
because that internal desire just was
yes,
strong.
I wanted to change. I didn't want to be the person, like, how do I not be this way? Right. Mm-hmm. Like, help me learn how to do something different, because I'm a 37-year-old man at this point, and I have no fucking clue how to live, and I'm alone for the first time in my life. I'm scared to death, and I don't know what to do.
Can you tell us about your experiences through this period before you finally got sober with steps 2 and 3, your spiritual journey? Or wasn't there one?
I have gone from, I went from being in meetings to being like a pure big book thumper, mm-hmm. to the other end of the spectrum where I don't care what the book says. I want to know what your experience is. I want your take on it. I have been deep down the rabbit hole of exploring Christianity, of exploring Buddhism. I like when it's all laid out on the table and I look at all of it, the best I can come up with is I have no fucking idea.
Yeah.
And I tend to operate better in that space of like, I don't know. I don't know. I know when I do these few simple things that my life gets better. Like, I know when I fuck up, instead of bucking up and being a dick and, burning down relationships, it's a lot easier for me to just swallow my pride and go make an amends. Like, and staying humble, it's so much easier for me, and being honest in my addiction with everybody I encounter. Everybody around me knows what I've been through and who I am, and I can just kind of walk around being this one person now versus like having these
a whole committee to keep track of. Yeah.
At some point, did you find a connection, an interconnection with a higher power in your life?
I did. It's the one thing in recovery that I've done 100% right. Is every morning I get up, I pray to this thing that I don't even have a name for.
Yeah.
I don't even call it God. I don't. But I pray for him to take this obsession away from me and to help me be a better person and live in his will today.
Yeah.
And at night, I thank him for the opportunity to do that and for making that happen that day. And that's really the only thing that I've done 100% right, other than digesting the first step. That's it.
Yeah. What about your experience with step 4 and 5? Through the years, you probably did more than one step 4 and 5, right?
Yeah, I've done a few of them. Yeah. I mean, the first ones are just like, it's just like word vomit,
Yeah.
just, spewing shit on paper, every institution and president and political belief. And like, it's just like all of it, and then this last one, it was actually like a lot shorter, it just kind of got, it boiled down to like a few things more with like my ex-wife, and
It's a lot more targeted.
And just, just to really see like how selfish and just like no compassion or empathy for like any other human being on the planet. Like, it's eye opening to like, see the world from someone else's view, and like all of the things that they did for you over the years that you just took, and, and took it all for granted, with my ex-wife, with my mother, with, all of it. And that, and that still comes up today. And I'm trying, it's like I'm remarried to Lauren, and, we have this beautiful relationship, but like, it's one of the things I struggle with is like this, you get so self-absorbed sometimes, right? Like and it's really hard to get out of that pattern of just me, 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 me.
I think this is what you're describing is an addictive person's natural way of being.
Mm-hmm.
And going into the fourth and fifth and identifying character defects like what you're talking about, the selfishness, self-centeredness, not having empathy for all that stuff is identified in 4 and 5. And we say, okay, now I know what I got to work on. What am I going to do? And you proceed with the rest of the steps. And through the steps for myself, it gives me a design for living that anytime I got a question or I doubt something, I just have to go back and look at the steps and say, all right, what am I supposed to do here? Am I supposed to make an amend? Am I supposed to ask my higher power for help with the character defect? All these different things. And I know that it is, the steps are not something you go through. There's something you practice. And when that practice stops, those character defects, they come back immediately.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's just
innate.
Yeah, it's right. It's our natural
it's our human
way.
condition.
So I always look at it and go, no wonder I drank.
Yeah.
Look at the way I lived. Look at the way my thinking was. And people say it's a thinking disease. And it was for me, and it sounds like it was for you as well, or is for you.
Yeah, it allowed me to tolerate myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what do you think it was that made the difference that last time in 2018? Can you identify, was there like a spiritual awakening? Was there a psychic experience in you, or was it just beaten in over time that finally?
Was there an Ozzy involved at all?
Well, actually there was, yeah. So when I got out of treatment, I was in a relationship at the time that was on the way out for various reasons that I'd caused. But I remember, so Ozzy had always been there for me. And I sort of had a hand in getting him into treatment for the first time, or his only time when he got sober. Mm-hmm. And then he was there for me, for the next 15 years. And we sat down one day, and he never had offered me any suggestions on like how to live my life. He was just always a friend. Even like in sobriety, we would go to shows together. I remember one time we were driving from like Lake Tahoe up to the Gorge in Washington, and like he's driving and I'm over there like drinking Moscow Mules and like smoking bud and like telling him how great my life is, and like, I went to treatment like two weeks later, and he never offered me any suggestions. But when I got out of treatment that time, we were talking about something, and he was like, Scott, the one thing I did that I think was more important than anything that, any meeting or any step that I did was I didn't date for a year. And for something about the way he said that, he had never told me to do anything. And he didn't really tell me to do anything then, but I could tell, like, he knew that I was fucking, sick and I needed to work on me. So, I took that to heart, and I took that year to focus on, just getting, because like every time I would get in a relationship, there I was, and I had a fallback plan, right? Like, so there was that. I remember that, and that was really critical. But my mother passed away on the July 23rd, so I had about 2 months sober, and from May 18th, the day I went to treatment, until July 23rd, there wasn't a minute of the day that went by that I didn't think about using. Mom was sick. There was all this drama was going on in my life. And when she passed, she passed, and then when we were at her funeral, and I remember I had asked the pastor that I didn't want him to preach. It was a Southern Baptist, and I didn't want him to preach. I was trying to dictate that, right? I didn't want that, because this is my mom. And so what is this pastor? So my brother and I and his wife, we're on the front row of this church, and there's 500 people behind me, and I'm alone. I'm 37. I got 2 years sober, 2 months sober. I'm clueless, pitiful. I'm a pitiful existence at this point. I've told the pastor that I don't want him to preach. What does he do? He gets up on the stage and gives this lengthy sermon. And I was sitting there, and the family gets up to leave first. And it was this little small town that I had left many years ago. I thought every one of them were hypocritical, just simple. I was better than everybody there. Right. It's the mindset I had going into that, really for my whole life. This arrogance, and just my ego was so fucking out of control. And I remember getting up. Most of the people there knew I had just gotten out of treatment. And I turned around and I walked out of that church. And it was just like a roasting of my soul. And everybody there was there for me. And they were there to support me. And they had been there the whole fucking time. But I was too sick to fucking see it, And we went to the graveside, and we buried her, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just like completely lost. But it was like this peace came over me, and like it was so like physical that I almost changed my sobriety date to that day for that reason, because from that day until now, I have never entertained the thought of getting high again. It went from being the only thing I thought about to that is the worst idea in the world. What are you thinking? And it was, it was a total psychic change. And, for myself, I like to think that it was my mother calling in the fucking reinforcements, like she's like, give this right, guy some fucking help, man. Like, look at
right,
him,
saying, now that I'm here, can you please take care of this guy? Yeah. So you had this profound spiritual experience and a new connectedness from that point forward. And that's, that's something a lot of people don't get.
Yeah.
But that's usually That's usually the thing that really makes the difference to long-term sobriety, if you can hold on to that. Because, another thing, like you say, and I'm the same way as you, I'm like, I don't know what it's called. I don't know. I can't define it. I can't even explain it to you. I can't explain it to me, but I experience it. So I know it's real, and I can commune with it. I can connect with it. And I know when I do that connection is real too, but I can't prove it to you.
Yeah. And
I do know it's not me.
I don't have to, right? Like it's like,
right. Yeah.
What's the point?
Yeah. So it's, it's beyond our intellect, and because it's beyond our intellect, it's also beyond our ego. Thank God. Literally. Right. Right?
Our intellect is what got us here a lot of times.
So let me ask you this, Scott. Have you worked with others?
I have. Yeah.
Tell me about what kind of experience that is for you.
Most of it has been failure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've got one sponsee that I'm still with, who, he calls me on a regular basis, and the guy's just fucking killing. It was actually an old friend of mine that I met at a show. I had about 2 years sobriety, and he had just picked up one, and we reconnected, and he talks to me on a weekly basis now. But most of them have been one hit wonders, 2 or 3 phone calls, and they're back out the door. I think I learned more from that than
Absolutely.
I do from anything else. Like I've got one sponsee. He burned his life down so bad, but like he was showing signs of hope. And like I had been through like everything he had been through, and I'm like, man, just like, you just got to quit fighting, and he's just like so full of piss and vinegar, and, hates his family, and like, he's just fucking, at odds with all of them, and I'm like trying to pull him out of that shit, and can't do it for him,
Yep.
But it brings me back to this, like, it brings me back to this sense of gratitude for, I don't know how anybody gets sober, to be honest with you, right? Like I feel like it is in every case it is a designed set of circumstances by something much greater than me, because like sometimes it feels like it's a fucking crapshoot with people, right? Like I don't know why I made it and this guy didn't make it, and I can do the best I can to help here and there, but ultimately, like, it's just not in my control, and it's hard for me to like accept that. And I like to, it's really hard. I like to get into things. I like to like take responsibility for it and control it. And you have so little control over that.
You really do.
Over somebody in active addiction.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, you look at yourself and you're like, could anybody have told me? Would anybody have gotten me sober? No.
Yeah, it's, I look back, you think about like all the sponsors that I had, and but I always had a fucking answer for everything, and like the truth was, when I was ready, like, I would have taken that instruction from fucking anybody,
Yeah. Now, are you involved with the Yellow Balloon groups as well?
I am. Yeah. That's been a very integral part of my recovery.
And for the listeners, if this is your first episode, can you explain to us, Scott, how the Yellow Balloon groups work?
So, it's pretty simple. It's various bands. The bands I personally like to follow is Fish. The Grateful Dead I think was the founder of this whole concept with a group called the Wharf Rats. Fish calls it the Fellowship. Every band has a different name for it, but the community as a whole is called the Yellow Balloon Community, because if you see the yellow balloons at a concert, that is someone who is there who is representing a community of sober people that are there to see live music. So they're not necessarily taking a stance with AA or any NA or any other 12-step or any other recovery group, but they're purely for the purpose of helping someone stay sober through a concert. So we have a table that we carry from show to show. Usually the band carries it with, as they travel, and 2 volunteers will volunteer for that show. They'll show up 30 minutes before the doors open, get the table, get it all set up, and then they're there for the duration of the concert. And it's just a safe space where if in the middle of concert, you're there and you get a little squirrely and you need somewhere to go to talk to somebody, like, we're there for you, and use like bands we follow, they have set breaks. So like they'll play for an hour and a half, and then they'll have 30, 45 minute set break. We'll have a meeting at set break, and we'll get together and we pass the yellow balloon around. The person with the yellow balloon gets to share, and it's really cool. You meet all different walks of life, working very different recovery programs, from, it's really cool to see. For me, it was so cool. Live music was something I didn't want to give up. And, that position of neutrality, that one of the promises of the 10th step, I get to experience that more because I get so lost in the music. And the music used to be a sideshow from all the drugs that I had in my pocket, right? And now I can go to a concert and just like get completely lost in the music. And I will see that person that I used to be beside me, and I'm like, man, I'm so glad that I don't have to do that, like to have fun. And, so in doing that, like I've met some of my best friends in the world I've met through that community. We meet in various cities across the country, and, we go sightseeing, we go to restaurants, we can actually like drive somewhere after a fucking concert because we're not out of our fucking minds,
Yeah. So a lot of those connections you make at shows are connections that last years.
They last, yeah.
Become big friendships, and then you see these people all over the country, right?
Yeah, it's like in AA, like you have this connection, right, based on, this one thing in your life. But, when now you can put 2 commonalities together, right? You got the love for the music and this love for recovery. It's like it sparks a whole new level of relationship. So, it's how my wife and I met, was through that community.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Scott, we're at the end of our time, but we want to thank you so much for sharing your story and your experience, strength, and hope with us.
Absolutely.
And, loved having you on the show.
For sure.
And perhaps we'll meet someday. Matt, my friend Matt, who I don't know if you know or not, but he's friends with Ozzy. He's going to take me to a concert, he tells me.
There you go.
Yeah. One of the shows, and introduce me to the Yellow Balloon experience. So until next time on the Glum Lot Podcast, I'm Mark.
I'm Brett.
I'm Scott.
As we wrap up another episode of the Glum Lot Podcast, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you who tuned in today. Navigating the path to recovery from alcohol and other substances is a journey filled with challenges, triumphs, and self-discovery. Remember, we're not affiliated with Alcoholics Anonymous, but we're here to provide a safe space for open conversations about the complexities of recovery. Your stories, courage, and resilience inspire us and our listeners alike. If you or someone you know is on the transformative journey, know that you're not alone. Join us next time as we continue to explore the diverse facets of recovery. Until then, stay strong, stay connected, and remember that each day is a step towards a brighter, sober tomorrow. Thank you for being part of the Glum Lot community.